The Marvels, in its second week, only made $10 million. The Marvels, in its second week, dropped 78%. There are not words for how horrific that is. That is the worst drop ever for a comic book movie. Not the worst for an MCU film, not the worst for a Marvel film. That is in the history of comic book movies. That is the worst second weekend drop. We are talking worse than Morbius. We're talking worse than Steel. It dropped 78%. Marvel movies typically are right around 60%. So, like, you go in at 60%, they're very front loaded, so 60% drop off is because so many people want to be their opening weekend. Guardians 3, back in May, opened a little bit softer than people were expecting. It only dropped, I believe it was like 48%. 48%, under 50%. A Marvel movie dropping 65%, that's really bad. 70% catastrophic. 70% like, wow, what just happened? How did this happen? The Marvels dropped 78%. A few weeks back, we were talking about Five Nights at Freddy's dropping over 75%. Like, oh, crap, that's bad. But keep in mind, it opened insanely profitable. The movie was already insanely profitable after a day. It was already made its money back. It was profitable after one day. After 3 days, it had already made multiple times its budget. And it was day and date release on Peacock. I can tell you this. My son, that's the most excited he's ever been for a movie. If I couldn't take him to the press screening, we would have been there opening night. He hasn't gone back to the theater to watch it, but he's watched it on Peacock at least 5 times now. Like, they're rewatching it on Peacock. But that was like a 75% drop, and we're like, wow, that's a huge number. We don't see numbers like that a lot. The Marvels had the worst opening ever for a Marvel film. Previously held by Incredible Hulk, this one has a much larger budget than Incredible Hulk. Ticket prices cost more than Incredible Hulk. So it's like sold significantly fewer tickets than Incredible Hulk did, and bigger issue because the budget's larger. So you think, okay, is word of mouth going to save it? Okay, it opens soft. Does that mean it's going to have a softer drop afterwards? No. It was the lowest opening and the harshest drop in the history of the genre. Comic book movies. Wowzers. They're not words for that. And the stats are saying that, demographically speaking, 65% dudes at the movie. So they tried to make a movie appealing to a broader audience, more kind of younger people, more girls, more women, and it did not click. They made a movie that didn't resonate. So the opening night crowd was much larger or much smaller than normal, and it was a higher percentage dudes than normal. Guardians 3 back in May, 60% dudes. This was 65% dudes, and it's the movie with 3 female leads. So this was a gigantic misfire. They epically dropped the ball on this movie, just in the concept, misreading the room when it came out, and then compounded by some things outside their control. The strike didn't help at all, that the actors couldn't promote it before it came out. But keep in mind, they couldn't promote it before the movie came out, but they had the last week. They could do some promotion this last week, and they did make their social media posts. They did some of that stuff, and the drop still was gigantic. So there just wasn't an audience for this particular movie, not compared to normal Marvel films. Wow. I don't even know what this means, but the idea that comic book movies are a surefire thing, that idea is gone. You just look at this year and the number of underperforming to disastrous performing comic book movies. The genre's not a surefire hit, but everybody's already booked out the next 3 years of the spumunk, the Sony universe with Craven and Madam Web leading the way. Marvel has announced 1,000 new projects in Phase 4 and 5. DC's got a whole reboot thing they're doing. But has the comic book movie bubble burst? Not that there aren't still good ones. Across the Spider-Verse, Guardians 3 still did great. But the idea that if you put a movie out there with people in capes, it'll make money, that doesn't fly anymore. And the idea that these are safe $200 million investments, that does not fly anymore. Everybody has to be radically going like, oh crap, have we put all of our eggs into the superhero basket? And it's I don't even know what my metaphors I'm combining here anymore. Is this thing collapsing in front of us? That's a lot what this looks like. So, yeah. Marvel, not in a great place. Like this, you can only imagine the last week they were already having a ton of meetings. And this is just like, this movie's not going to make 100 million domestic. That's crazy. A Marvel movie not making 100 million domestic. It might not even make 200 million globally. Like we were talking about how Ant-Man 3 underperformed, only making 100 million opening weekend. We were talking about Ant-Man 3 underperforming, only made 200 million here in the US. This is half of that. Half of what we were already saying was bad. Marvel really needs to regroup. Only having Deadpool 3 next year, probably very wise, because they are not in a good place. Their brand is tarnished, and they've got to be questioning some of their judgment and some of the stuff they've been doing recently.